Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:01. Welcome to our Education Committee meeting on Wednesday, February the 3rd, 2021. Before we get started, it is with great respect and humility we acknowledge and honor the lands of the Snuneymuxw people. The Snuneymuxw people maintain their profound, unique, and spiritual connection to the land through ageless traditions, teachings, stewardship, and expressions of reciprocity. I'd also like to acknowledge our students and staff are located on the Stz'uminus and Snow-Now-Wis lands. I'd like to ask everybody in attendance today to please comment in the chat bar if you have any questions or comments, and I will follow the list accordingly. I'd like to ask, does anyone have any additions, deletions, or changes in the order of the agenda? Okay, seeing none, are there any objections to the approval of the agenda? Okay, seeing none, the agenda is approved. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the Education Committee meeting held on January 6, 2021? I see Trustee O'Neill has moved the motion and seconded by Trustee Stanley. Anybody opposed? Okay, seeing none, the minutes are approved. We have no presentations this evening. We do, however, have senior staff reports. And our first staff report this evening comes from our Department of Learning Services. And to get us started, this is regarding the district programs and activities around anti-racism. And I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Superintendent Tim Davey for introductions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is my pleasure to be introducing on behalf of the Department of Learning Services, Director of Instruction, Jackie Poulin, Director of Instruction, Carrie Steele, and Learning Coordinator with the department, Shelley Gavoyich. And as you've noted, they're going to be speaking this evening on anti-racism and cultural safety in the Nanaimo Ladies Public Schools. So thank you very much. I'll turn it over to our presenters.
Thank you. So through the chair, we really appreciate the opportunity to showcase some of this work this evening. We're at the beginning of a journey that is going to take some time. I think this is complex work and there's lots of layers to it, and we want to do a really good job. So our goal this evening is to provide you with a little bit of a sense of the work being done both at the classroom and district level. I'm going to kind of launch us on with the first slide here, but I will be turning it over to Learning Coordinator Shelley Gavoyich in a few minutes. She's going to kind of walk us through some of the bits and pieces of things that are happening around the system right now. And then Director Poulin will come on towards the end and share a little bit of information about the things that aren't captured in the images in the slides tonight. We'll encourage you to look at the information and consider the information through a lens of intersectionality this evening. We know that a person's identity is not one-dimensional. So while we might be talking about anti-racism or aspects of culture, you know, we also need to consider this through the lens of people's identities, their gender, their cultural experience, their language experience, sexual orientation and gender identities, that kind of thing. So we'll continue to build on the good work with respect to SOGI that's happened in the past. While that's not the focus of this evening's presentation, certainly those layers in our system have continued over time, and we continue to do that work. This is the beginning of work that will happen over the next 3 years. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Shelley, and she can walk us through things in a little more detail.
Thanks, Director Steele, and thanks for having me here today. Can you hear me and see me? Because one of my screens just died on me, so.
Crystal clear. Yep.
Okay,
thanks.
Perfect. Thank you for having me here today. I'm happy to be here to talk about anti-racism and cultural safety in NLPS. I want to begin today by sharing two really important disclaimers. The first is that as individuals, we can only ever share our own experiences and stories, and we can't claim to speak for other groups or others, and we can't possibly claim to know all of the experiences that are happening in the district. But what we do know and what is clear is that there's a lot of beautiful work that's happening. A lot of it we never really hear about, and it's happening with teachers in classrooms with students. It's happening with our QP staff and with our principals. And I wanted to really illustrate that by sharing a personal example with you here today. I have two daughters in our school district. One is in kindergarten and one is in grade 1. And this would be a couple, I guess 3 weeks ago now. We were sitting at the kitchen table on the weekend and they were coloring as they often do, and they were drawing pictures of themselves and our family. And my older daughter was looking for something and couldn't find it. And she sort of looked over at her little sister and said, "Hey, can you pass me the skin colored marker?" And immediately I sort of stood up and I thought, that's a conversation we've never really had in our family. And before I had the opportunity to say anything, my younger daughter, who's a little bit sassy, got both hands out and put them on her hips, and immediately starts at her sister and said, "Shay, there's no such thing as skin color. There's lots of different types of skin color, and there's no such thing as one skin color." And next, she then, in her typical 5-year-old fashion, took a handful of markers and kind of tossed them over at her sister and said, "Here, figure out which one's you and use that." And in the moment, I was like, "Wow, that's really insightful for a 5-year-old, especially since we've never had that conversation." And I didn't really think much of it, other than, that we needed to have some conversations in our family. And then a couple of days later, the following fresh grade post came through on my email. And I don't know if you can see the pictures clearly, but on the left-hand side, there's a picture of a bunch of different markers of different colors, and there's some paint samples or paint swatches or whatever they're called. And then on the right-hand side, there are some little sort of pieces of like thin sliced pieces of wood that, had a little necklace piece on top of it. And what I realized when this came through was that my daughters, or I should say what I was reminded of, is that my daughter's kindergarten class had been taking on an inquiry project for the last couple of weeks around identity. And one of the things that they were asked to do as part of this sort of large scale identity project is looking at creating sort of a model of themselves. And so they had to, select or identify their own skin color and paint it onto their particular model and draw their face. And there were lots of other different components of this project as well. But really, it was sort of a unique inquiry project that really allowed all of the identities in the class to be seen and celebrated. And I thought it was really cool. But I thought what was also really exceptional was the fact that what happens in our classrooms really filters into our home. This is something that I literally saw it acting out at my kitchen table. And had I not seen this fresh grade post, I wouldn't know that this had even happened. And I think there are so many examples of these in our school where there's amazing work happening in our schools that's filtering to our families and out into our community, and we can't possibly know all of it. Just like I wanted to give a disclaimer that we can't know all of the amazing work that's happening in the district, I think we also need to acknowledge the racialized experience for some staff and students within our district. And we really need to honor and value that there may be people not having a positive experience in our schools, and that we need to seek opportunities to do and be better, both as individuals and as a system. And while I don't think this is necessarily unique to NLPS, I think that acknowledging that we still have work to do is a really important piece of us moving forward. So how are we beginning this work? We know that if our end goal, sort of as a school and district community, is to be where all our students feel welcome, included, supported, and uplifted, where things like diversity clubs don't even need to exist because diversity is something that's so universally celebrated, then we need to begin having these courageous conversations. I know I had a conversation with a principal a few days ago about the fact when we talk with kids about racism and identity and all of those different pieces, it's really quite easy, right? Kids are open to those conversations, but it often gets more challenging as we get into adulthood. And so I think we need to have some of these, or provide learning opportunities for staff and students around shifting the discourse. And some of this work is individual and some is systemic. And there's lots of different ways that this learning is already being supported. So I want to share some of the things that are happening in our district. Again, I can't speak to all of it, but I'm excited to be able to share some of the things that are happening. The first one that I wanted to talk about is principal and vice principal shared learning sessions. So this is a 4-part series facilitated by myself, Director Steele, and Director Poulin, that has 4 different parts. The first happened last month and was around self-reflection and identity, and really looking at how who we are impacts what we do. And yeah, it was a really powerful session. Next week, we're looking at the second one around building vocabulary. So why understanding vocabulary is important, and what words we really need to have a good grasp of to be able to actually sort of undertake the changing the discourse. Then next month, we're going to be looking at selecting resources. So how to, select resources for our classrooms and for our schools that sort of allow there to be, ways for all students to be able to see themselves, both in the physical appearance of our school, but also in the movies that we're watching, the books that we're reading, etc. And then lastly, looking at responding to racism. I also wanted to mention that our NLPS Learns website is also being sort of designed to have multiple parts released with these sessions. So there's currently one part of our website under NLPS Learns under the social justice page that actually has a part outlining self-reflection and how to take on some work, looking at identity and looking at sort of some posing questions. And then each of those other pieces of the website will be released in correspondence with those sections. And of course, there will be additions as new things are found. I also wanted to share Teams Talks. So Teams Talks are a professional learning opportunity that exists across a variety of different topics in our district. Currently, I'm part of an anti-racism collaborative group where we look at sharing ideas, thoughts, resources, self-reflection ideas, and specifically the one that I'm involved in has a secondary focus. But it's been a really powerful way to be able to have some of these conversations and to talk about, what are people doing in their classroom with students, or what are some great books that we could be looking at reading, and just really opening the conversation. I also wanted to talk a little bit about Safe Schools Advisory Committee. This is my second year on the committee, and we even noticed last year actually that one of the things we wanted to do was take a look and see maybe who wasn't on the committee and who was missing from the table. And so we're really excited this year to have worked at diversifying our constitution. So this year we've added representatives from Literacy Central Vancouver Island, the Nanaimo Pride Society. We also have 2 settlement workers in schools on the committee with us. And we also will be having a new member from the Ministry of Children, Family and Development, an Indigenous Child, Youth and Mental Health outreach worker, that will be joining us as well. In addition to the continued good work that has been happening around SOGI in the district, the committee has also decided that this year we really want to sort of dig deep and have a focus on anti-racism and cultural safety. And currently, one of the things we're doing is looking at Administrative Procedure 350, honoring diversity and challenging racism, and that's sort of our next task that we're working on right now. So I'll pass it over to Director Poulin.
Thank you so much, Shelley. Appreciate all of that. I have the pleasure of actually sharing out just a sample of the different district intersectional opportunities that are being provided or supported by our learning coordinators. And this is honestly just a sample because we could go on further. So we had, back in the spring when we went to, full online learning, they developed anti-racism guidelines for at-home learning to be able to use there. They continue to support any student groups that are interested in starting up in regards to anti-racism, so STAR groups. They provide professional learning support for school staff, so follow-ups to the ones that we do with the principals, but any other times that school staff reach out. Our English Language Arts Diverse Content Book Club, so working with a group of English Language Arts teachers. Helping our teacher librarians continue to diversify their collections, so making sure that they're taking a look at their library collection and making sure that it has diverse opportunities there. Secondary counselors are doing a book club around being culturally responsive and aware. Making sure that we have ways for all of our students and teachers to access Halkamenim language resources and Halkamenim teachers that are bringing language to all of our students. One of our coordinators has been working on creating Halkamenim language books for our younger students. We have 2 done so far, and she's working on a couple of more. And providing general resources to teachers to help bring locally relevant Indigenous perspectives to the classroom. In addition to just those things, they're also working with our staff all the time to helping them be more culturally responsive in their teaching. So using students' cultural experiences in their daily instruction, embracing the native languages that students bring in and having them be assets to the classroom. Making sure that our classrooms are creating classroom environments that represent and respect all of our students. There's some friendships clubs that are out there that are working. I know that Loa Richardson has been working with the Swiss people to help bring in the friendship clubs. And then one example, I want to loop it back to that. I know that Shelley started at the beginning saying that there's examples of many things out there, and she used the kindergarten classroom. We're going to loop it back to one last example around that's happening in there was a Bayview teacher, Jody Glanfield. One of our coordinators, Olivia Densmore, worked with cultural and language support teacher Mori Muhammad and learning coordinator Laura Richardson to develop an Arabic English sound chart. English has many sounds that do not often exist in Arabic, so this chart makes the home language connections to the sounds for students. The bonus is that the students can see teachers struggle to pronounce Arabic words, so you get a little bit of reverse flavor on it, and they can be put in the role of being the language teacher. There was lots of fun and lots of laughs while learning and connecting to identity. The students could not stop thanking everybody for the lessons with this new chart. So just wanted to loop it back to some of the pieces that were happening. Again, I just feel like I just had an opportunity there to share the great work that was being done by some of the other coordinators as well as by our entire district. I'd like to thank Shelley for joining us tonight for sure in doing this presentation. And thank you, Director Steele, for starting us off.
Thank you. Is that the end of the presentation? I didn't want to interrupt. That's great.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
We're
you so
happy to
much.
Answer questions if anybody has any though.
Yeah.
Although I see my partners are hiding already, we may need them back.
I guess just on a quick thing, Shelley, we're not able to actually see you. We can hear you, but we can't see you. Just a heads up.
My apologies. One of my
There
screens
you are.
died, and so I couldn't see the camera. Like it wouldn't let me access my camera when my screen was being shared.
Of course, we had the good PowerPoint slides to turn to, so it all worked out.
Sorry.
Thank you so much for your presentations. Lots of great information. I'm wondering if there's any questions or comments from those who are attending. We have our DPAC rep, Jessica Krog-Irving. I'm wondering if you wanted to ask your question or did you want me just to ask on your behalf?
I was just wondering how many at the principal, vice principal meetings, or I forget what the term was, how many are actually participating?
All of them. Yeah, we're doing it at our monthly PVP meeting, and we chose that quite deliberately because it's a chance to do some learning as a community. And I think one of the pieces that's part of it that Shelley didn't reference when she was sharing the content of the sessions is it comes with homework. So the activities and lessons and bits of reflection that she's encouraging our principals and vice principals to do, they're being asked to bring back to their staffs and implement at a staff meeting between the learning sessions for us. So we're hoping that will, I mean, the hope is always that learning will lead to ripples in the pond. We're hoping these ripples will spread a little bit faster because of the intentionality behind the structure. So it's sort of, you know, session for PVP, unveiling the piece in the learning portal, and then principals and vice principals using those resources with their staff with an intent for the staff to then take that back to their kids. So we're trying to do it quite deliberately, piece by piece, to add the layers as we go.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing any. I had a similar question actually to our DPAC rep, but it's been answered now. I'm just going to make a comment that I really appreciate all the information that's been brought forward. So much great work that's happening. In addition to the great work that's happening, I really appreciate how you acknowledge that we still have work to do, that these are ongoing conversations, that we need to be comfortable with discomfort and you know, having these courageous conversations. I think that these are all, you know, just that acknowledgement that this is a process and not a, well, I guess the end result is that, like you say, that this is, you know, diversity is, diversity clubs, I think is what you're talking about, are necessary because it's just embedded within. But I do appreciate all this information and the acknowledgement that these are ongoing conversations. And I also wanted to acknowledge, I'm so happy to hear that the Safe Schools Advisory Committee is increasing their diversity and bringing in some really great representation from the community. I bet there's going to be a lot of great work continuing from that committee moving forward. And then also I'm happy to hear about all the great work happening from our learning coordinators. It's a good team that you have there, so it's always good to get updates around what they're doing. I do see that Trustee Robinson has a comment that he'd like to make. Go ahead, Trustee Robinson.
A very brief comment, but I will never, ever forget the conversation with the kindergarten student and the grade 1 student around the kitchen table. That is so, so powerful. Thank you for sharing it.
Absolutely. Are there any other comments or questions? I'm not seeing any. I wanted to give a big thank you to Director Poulin and Learning Coordinator Shelley. And Shelley, I'm sorry, I can never pronounce your last name wrong, so I skipped right to Shelley there. Yeah. And of course, our Director of Instruction, Carrie Steele. I appreciate the presentation and for all the information that's been brought forward. And I don't think we have any other questions or comment, but we have this valuable information now. So we'll move on to the next topic. We have 8.2. And again, I will pass it back unless before I move ahead, I wonder if our superintendent has any words that he would like to say before we change the topic. Sorry to throw that out there.
Well, thanks through you, Chair. I'll just add my congratulations and thanks to the team here, Directors Poulin and Steele, and of course, Shelley Gavoyich for the presentation. This is of course very important work and requires some self-reflection, but it really requires us to be very intentional about the work, because this topic can sort of slip away in our daily lives, and it really requires us to read and learn from people like Shelley and our two directors. So I would implore people listening, trustees and others, to read or continue to ask these folks to present on this topic. Great job tonight. Thank you.
Thank you to our superintendent. You always word things so well. Thank you very much. I'm going to move back to our deputy superintendent, Tim Davey, around the local school calendar. And there is a motion within this topic as well, but I'll let you go ahead.
Okay. Again, thank you through you, Madam Chair. Just express my thanks to the presenters that spoke before me here. So thank you. So on behalf of the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools Calendar Committee, I'm bringing forward submission for consideration at the Education Committee meeting this evening. In your packages on page 17 through 21 of 22, you'll see calendar information. And bringing this forward as a 2-year local calendar for the years 2021-22 and 2022-23. So this is a draft calendars with an action sheet that is attached on page 17 in the agenda. And what the recommendation here is recommended dates being brought forward. The work has been brought forward to the Professional Development Committee, which is a joint committee between the Teachers Association and the employer. And it should be noted that there has been an additional curriculum implementation day, which has been added in May. Recommendation for this to be added in May. This day has been removed or had been removed in 2015. And it was recently determined that the time was not being used or necessary for use for PLC time. So it's been put back into the calendar, and so you'll see the additional days there as a non-instructional implementation day. And after discussion with the committee, then we have a recommended motion on the action sheet for a 30-day consultation. So I'll just quickly read that. That the Education Committee recommended that staff make the attached 2-year draft local school calendar for 2021-22 and 22-23 available to the public immediately, and to report back at the March Education Committee meeting with recommendations. So I'll I present this to the Education Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions or comments? Okay, I'm seeing none. As the chair, I can't move this motion, but are there any trustees who would like to move this motion? Oh, I see our Chair McKay is back in the meeting. Welcome back. And Trustee McKay is moving the motion, and I have Trustee O'Neill is seconding the motion. Trustee McKay, do you feel it necessary to read the motion again? I know we just heard it.
Yes.
Yeah, whatever works. Is it necessary? No. Okay, great. So we won't reread it. The motion has been moved and seconded. Do we have any comments or discussion items around the motion that has been moved? Seeing none. Any objections to the motion? Okay, I'm seeing none. The motion passes unanimously. Great, thank you very much, Deputy Superintendent Davey.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're muted.
And I said all of my best things right there. Thank you, Bill. I was just commenting that I think this is going to be a quick meeting, or I know it now. So that's nice. I'm going to move on to section 9, correspondence referred from the regular board meeting. There's none. We have no unfinished business, no new business. Any questions this evening? We're seeing none, no questions. And can I get a motion to adjourn? Great, I have Trustee O'Neill moving and seconded by Trustee Wilkinson. Perfect. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. It still says live.